My husband threw me out like trash, keeping everything we built together. All I had left was a dusty old envelope my grandmother gave me before she died. Inside was a rusty key and a faded note that said, "Only when you have nothing left." I never understood what it meant until the day I used it. What happened next made 3 banks close their doors and the state attorney general show up at my doorstep. Come on, tell me where you're watching from. Don't forget to like and subscribe so we can uncover this mystery together. The Georgia heat was suffocating as I stood on the sidewalk outside what used to be my home. My name is Amara Chen, and until 3 hours ago, I thought I knew exactly who I was. I was Mrs. Marcus Webb, wife of Atlanta's most celebrated real estate mogul, living in a stunning Victorian mansion in Inman Park, one of the city's most prestigious neighborhoods. Now I was just Amara, a woman with a rolling suitcase, a purse, and the clothes on my back, watching movers carry my furniture out of my house and load it onto trucks. "That's the last of it, Mr. Webb," one of the movers called out. Marcus appeared at the front door, his arm wrapped around Simone, a 26-year-old influencer with perfect skin and a smile that could cut glass. She was wearing my silk robe, the one I'd bought in Paris on our 10th anniversary trip. "Baby, is that antique mirror going to fit in the master bedroom?" Simone asked, her voice dripping with fake sweetness. "Anything for you, gorgeous," Marcus replied, kissing her temple. I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. Again. This morning had started like any other Wednesday. I'd been in Alabama for 3 weeks, caring for my aunt who'd had emergency surgery. I'd called Marcus every day, and he'd assured me everything was fine, that he missed me, that he couldn't wait for me to come home. When I'd walked through the front door of our mansion 2 hours ago, I'd expected to find my husband. Instead, I'd found a stranger, Amara. Marcus had looked at me like I was an unexpected package delivery. "You're early." "Early?" "Marcus, I told you I was coming home today. I texted you this morning." That's when Simone had walked down the stairs, wearing nothing but a towel and that robe. "Oh," she'd said, looking me up and down. "You must be the ex-wife." "Ex-wife?" I'd turned to Marcus, my heart pounding. "Marcus, what is she talking about?" "Sit down, Amara. We need to talk." But there'd been no talking. There'd been a folder of divorce papers I'd never seen, let alone signed. There'd been a restraining order Marcus claimed I'd violated by harassing him, all fabricated. There'd been a smirking lawyer who informed me that the house was in Marcus's name only, that our joint accounts had been emptied, and that I had exactly 2 hours to remove my personal effects before the police would be called for trespassing. "But I lived here for 12 years, I'd protested. "This is my home. I decorated every room. I planted the garden. "You signed a post-nuptial agreement 3 years ago," the lawyer had interrupted, sliding a document across the table. Everything reverted to Mr. Webb's sole ownership. I'd stared at the signature on the page. It looked like mine, but I'd never seen this document before in my life. I never signed this. "Your signature says otherwise," Marcus had said coldly. "Look, Amara, don't make this harder than it needs to be. You came into this marriage with nothing. You leave with nothing. That's fair. Nothing." The word had echoed in my head like a death sentence. Now, standing on the sidewalk, I watched the movers carry out the last of what Marcus had deemed my personal effects. A few boxes of books, some old photo albums, and my grandmother's hope chest, a battered wooden trunk I'd inherited when she died 5 years ago. "That piece of junk?" Simone had wrinkled her nose when she saw it. "That's not going in my house. Put it with her stuff." My grandmother's chest. The one thing that had meant something. A moving truck pulled up and 2 men began loading my meager possessions. Marcus walked down the front steps, Simone clinging to his arm like a designer accessory. "Amara," he said, his tone almost bored. My lawyer will be in touch about finalizing everything. Don't try to contest anything. You'll lose, and it'll just be embarrassing for you. Marcus, please. My voice cracked. We've been together for 15 years, married for 12. How can you just throw that away? Throw it away? He laughed. Baby, I didn't throw anything away. I upgraded. Simone giggled, pressing herself against him. The movers finished loading my things. Where do you want this delivered, ma'am? One of them asked. I stared at him blankly. I had no answer. I had nowhere to go. Just leave it here, I said. I'll figure something out. The men exchanged uncomfortable glances but did as I asked, unloading the boxes and the trunk onto the sidewalk. Marcus and Simone disappeared back into the house, my house, closing the door behind them. Through the windows, I could see them laughing, toasting with champagne glasses. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. Around me, the expensive neighborhood was coming alive with people returning from work, walking dogs, jogging. Everyone had somewhere to be, someone to be with. I was completely alone. I sat down on my grandmother's trunk, my legs finally giving out. I pulled out my phone, checking my bank account one more time, hoping it had been a glitch. Balance. $0. Marcus had cleaned out everything, including the savings account my parents had helped me start before they passed away. Money I'd inherited. Money that had nothing to do with him. All gone. I had $23 in my wallet. That was it. Tears finally came, hot and angry, streaming down my face. I didn't try to stop them. A security guard from one of the neighboring houses approached me. Ma'am? Are you all right? Do you need me to call someone? I'm fine, I lied. I'm leaving. But where was I going? I had no family left in Atlanta. My friends were all Marcus's friends, people who'd already chosen sides. My phone had been suspiciously quiet all day. No calls, no texts. They already knew. Marcus had probably spun some story about me being crazy, unstable, trying to steal from him. The security guard lingered, clearly uncomfortable. Ma'am, I'm going to have to ask you to move along. You can't camp out here. Camp out. As if I was some vagrant. I understand, I said, standing up. I'm going. But where? I looked at my pathetic collection of belongings, the boxes, the suitcase, and the trunk. I couldn't carry all of it. I'd have to choose. The books could stay. The photo albums hurt, but they could stay too. The suitcase with clothes I needed, and the trunk. I stared at my grandmother's chest. It was heavy, awkward, old, but it was the only thing connecting me to my family, to who I was before Marcus. I remembered the day she'd given it to me, 3 months before she died. Amara, baby, she'd said, her voice weak but insistent. This trunk has been in our family for 4 generations. Your great-great-grandmother brought it from Shanghai. It holds our legacy. It's beautiful, Grandma, I'd said, running my hand over the carved wood. Inside, you'll find things, important things. But I need you to promise me something. Anything. Don't open it until you absolutely have to. Not when you're curious. Not when you're bored. Only when you have nothing left. Do you understand? I hadn't understood then. It had seemed like the ramblings of an old woman who'd lived through too much trauma, too much loss. But now, sitting on a sidewalk with everything I owned, the words hit differently. Only when you have nothing left. I had nothing left. With shaking hands, I knelt in front of the trunk. The lock was old, rusted. I'd never had a key for it, and Grandma had never given me one. But as I examined it closely, I noticed something I'd missed before. There was a small hidden compartment on the side, barely visible in the carved design. I pressed it, and it popped open. Inside was a tiny brass key. My heart pounded as I inserted it into the lock. It turned with a grinding sound, and the lid creaked open. The smell of cedar and mothballs wafted out. Inside were layers of silk fabric, protecting whatever lay beneath. I pushed aside the fabric and gasped. The trunk wasn't full of sentimental keepsakes or old clothes. It was full of documents. Legal documents, folders, envelopes, all carefully organized and preserved. My hands trembled as I pulled out the first folder. The tab read, Property Holdings, Chen Family Trust. I opened it. Inside were deeds, property deeds, not just one or two, but dozens. Properties all over Georgia, some in Atlanta, some in Savannah, some in small towns I'd barely heard of, and every single one listed the owner as the Chen Family Irrevocable Trust, Amara Chen, sole beneficiary. What the hell? I whispered. I grabbed another folder. This one was labeled Investment Accounts. Inside were statements from investment firms I'd never heard of. Accounts in my name showing balances that made my head spin. Stocks, bonds, mutual funds, all carefully managed and growing for years. The most recent statement was dated 3 months ago, just after my grandmother had died. Total portfolio value, $47 million. I couldn't breathe. This had to be a mistake. My grandmother had lived in a modest house in Decatur, drove an old car, wore simple clothes. She'd been comfortable but not wealthy, or so I'd thought. But as I dug deeper into the trunk, a story emerged. My grandmother hadn't just been a sweet old lady who made dumplings and told stories about the old country. She'd been a businesswoman, a genius, with money who'd taken the small savings her parents had given her when they'd immigrated and turned it into an empire. But she'd done it quietly, secretly, because she'd learned early that women, especially Chinese women in the South, couldn't show wealth without becoming targets. She'd built a fortune and hidden it, protecting it, waiting for the right time to pass it on. And she'd left it all to me. At the bottom of the trunk was an envelope with my name on it in my grandmother's handwriting. My darling Amara, if you are reading this, it means you have reached the moment I always feared and prepared for. You have nothing left. Someone has taken everything from you, made you feel small, made you believe you are worthless. But you are not worthless, my dear girl. You are a Chen, and the Chen women have survived everything. War, famine, immigration, racism, poverty. We have survived by being smart, by being patient, and by keeping our power hidden until the moment we need it most. This trunk contains your inheritance, but more than that, it contains your weapon. Inside these documents is proof that you are not powerless, that you never were. I did not tell you about this wealth while I was alive, because I wanted you to build your own life, make your own choices, not have your decisions influenced by money. I wanted you to know who you truly were before you knew what you had, but now you know both. Use this power wisely, my darling. Don't seek revenge. Seek justice. Don't destroy. Build. Show them who you really are. And remember, the Chen women never lose. We only pretend to lose until we're ready to win. Your grandmother, Mei Chen. I read the letter 3 times, tears streaming down my face. Not tears of sadness anymore, but of something else. Something fierce and powerful. I looked up at the mansion, my former home. Through the windows, I could see Marcus and Simone, still celebrating, probably planning their future in my house, with my furniture and my life. They had no idea. I carefully packed the documents back into the trunk, my mind racing. I needed to verify everything, get the accounts activated, figure out exactly what I had, and I needed to do it without Marcus finding out. I pulled out my phone and searched for high-end hotels nearby. The Ritz-Carlton in Buckhead had availability. With my credit cards all canceled by Marcus, I'd have to use my $23 in cash to get there somehow, but first things first. Then I remembered something. At the bottom of the trunk, beneath all the documents, was a small black velvet pouch I hadn't noticed before. I pulled it out and opened it. Inside was a credit card, pristine and unused. But this wasn't a normal credit card. It was made of metal, heavy and cold in my hand. The card was completely black with a small symbol in the corner I didn't recognize. There was a note attached. Emergency use only, no limit. PIN. Your birthday. My grandmother had thought of everything. I stood up, dusting off my clothes. The security guard was still watching me from a distance. I pulled my suitcase handle up, hefted the trunk with one hand, it was heavier than I expected, and walked toward the main street. A luxury, black car pulled up beside me. The driver rolled down his window. Need a ride, miss? I looked at him, surprised. I hadn't called for a car. I don't. Maychen's estate management service, he said, showing me an ID. We've been monitoring the situation. Mrs. Chen left instructions that if you ever accessed the emergency resources, we were to assist immediately. My grandmother's reach extended even beyond the grave. Take me to the Ritz-Carlton, I said, my voice steady. And then I need you to secure these items in a safe deposit box at First National Bank. Of course, Miss Chen. As the car pulled away, I looked back one last time at the mansion. Marcus and Simone were visible in the window, toasting each other, completely oblivious. Let them celebrate. They had no idea the storm that was coming. The next morning, I woke up in a suite at the Ritz-Carlton. The sheets were Egyptian cotton. The view overlooked downtown Atlanta, and for the first time in weeks, I felt rested. But there was no time to waste. I showered, dressed in the designer clothes I'd grabbed from my suitcase. Marcus had been so busy with his theatrics yesterday that he'd let me take more than he'd intended, and studied the documents I'd kept with me. My first call was to the law firm listed as the trustees of my grandmother's estate. Morrison, Lee, and Associates, a professional voice answered. This is Amara Chen. I need to speak with whoever manages the Chen Family Trust. There was a pause. One moment, please. I was transferred 3 times before a man with a deep, authoritative voice came on the line. Miss Chen, this is Robert Morrison. We've been expecting your call, though I'll admit I hoped we'd never receive it. You knew about the trigger clause? Your grandmother was very specific. The trust was designed to activate only under certain circumstances. Our monitoring service alerted us yesterday when the property surveillance showed you were forcibly removed from your residence. Property surveillance. My grandmother had been watching, even from beyond. I need to meet with you immediately, I said. Of course. Can you be at our office in an hour? The law firm occupied the top 3 floors of one of downtown Atlanta's most prestigious buildings. When I gave my name at reception, I was immediately escorted to a private conference room with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Robert Morrison was a distinguished black man in his 60s, with silver hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. Miss Chen, he said, standing to shake my hand. I'm so sorry for your loss, both of your grandmother and of your marriage. Thank you. Your grandmother was one of my favorite clients. Brilliant woman. She prepared for this scenario with the precision of a military strategist. He gestured to a chair, and I sat. First, he said, pulling out a folder, let me confirm what you found. The Chen Family Trust contains approximately $47 million in liquid assets, stocks, bonds, and mutual funds. Additionally, there are 32 properties, most of which are currently leased and generating income. My head spun. 32 properties? Yes. Your grandmother was particularly gifted at identifying undervalued real estate in developing neighborhoods. She'd buy properties that others overlooked, wait for the area to improve, and either sell or lease. The passive income from the properties currently generates about $400,000 per month. $400,000 per month. While I'd been pinching pennies to buy groceries, I'd been the beneficiary of a trust generating almost $5 million a year. Why didn't she tell me? I whispered. Because she wanted you to be you, Robert said gently. She saw what happened to too many children of wealthy families. They never developed their own identities, their own strengths. She wanted you to know who Amara Chen was before you knew what Amara Chen had. But she knew I married Marcus. She let me struggle. She did. And she also left instructions that if your marriage was genuine, if Marcus truly loved you, then on your 20th anniversary, she wanted me to reveal the trust to both of you as a gift. She was testing him, Miss Chen. Testing whether he'd stay with you even when he thought you had nothing. The cruelty of it hit me. My grandmother had known. Somehow, she'd known that Marcus was the type of man who would abandon me the moment he thought I had no value. He failed the test, I said. Spectacularly. Robert pulled out another folder. Now, let's discuss your husband's actions yesterday. The divorce papers, the post-nuptial agreement, the forged signature. How did you... We've been monitoring the situation, as I mentioned. Your grandmother left very specific instructions about what to do if someone tried to defraud you. He slid a document across the table. It was a detailed forensic analysis of the post-nuptial agreement Marcus's lawyer had shown me. This signature is forged, Robert said, pointing to the analysis. Quite well done, actually, but definitely not your handwriting. We've already filed a police report for forgery and fraud. We've also contacted the Georgia Bar Association about Marcus's attorney, who appears to have knowingly used a forged document. Wait, you filed a police report? This morning. Your grandmother's instructions were clear. If someone tried to defraud you, we were to pursue them with the full force of the law immediately. No warnings, no negotiations. I sat back, stunned. There's more, Robert continued. The house Marcus claims is solely his? We've done a title search. Your grandmother actually purchased that property 15 years ago through a shell corporation, then allowed Marcus to believe he was buying it. The deed is complicated, but the short version is that the house is technically owned by a corporation that's wholly owned by the Chen family trust. What? Miss Chen, your grandmother was 12 steps ahead of everyone. She never trusted Marcus. From the moment you started dating him, she had investigators looking into his background, his finances, his character. She found multiple red flags, but she also knew that if she told you, you'd defend him. Young love, and all that. So she bought my house? She bought the house and structured the sale so that Marcus believed he was purchasing it with his own money and a mortgage. In reality, the mortgage payments were going into an escrow account that's also part of your trust. He's been paying you rent for 12 years and didn't know it. I started laughing. I couldn't help it. The absurdity, the genius, the sheer audacity of it. So Marcus doesn't own the house? Not even a little bit. And by forcibly removing you yesterday and moving his mistress in, he's now guilty of illegal eviction, theft of property, since he removed items belonging to you, and trespassing. Can we evict him? We can do better than that. Robert said with a smile that reminded me of a shark. We can destroy him. Over the next 3 hours, Robert walked me through everything. The trust, the properties, the investments, and most importantly, the plan my grandmother had left behind. Mei Chen had been preparing for this exact scenario for years. She'd gathered evidence, built cases, and left a roadmap for how to systematically dismantle anyone who tried to hurt her granddaughter. Your grandmother called it the nuclear option, Robert explained. She hoped you'd never need it, but if you did, she wanted to make sure you had everything necessary to not just survive, but to win absolutely. The nuclear option included complete financial records showing Marcus's company had been built partially with money embezzled from joint accounts he'd shared with me, evidence that Marcus had been having affairs for at least 5 years, with multiple women, including financial transactions showing he'd spent marital assets on his mistresses, documentation that Marcus's company had committed tax fraud, building code violations, and had several pending lawsuits he'd hidden from me. A comprehensive file on Simone, showing she was actually married to someone else and was using Marcus for money while her actual husband lived in Miami. How did my grandmother get all this? I asked, overwhelmed. She hired the best investigators in the country, and she updated the files regularly. The most recent information is from last month. Last month. a month before everything fell apart. "It's like she knew," I whispered. She did know. She knew because she'd seen this pattern before. Her own mother was betrayed by her husband. Her sister was defrauded by her children. The Chen women have learned to prepare for betrayal because history taught them it was inevitable. "So, what do I do now?" Robert leaned forward. "Miss Chen, I need to ask you a question, and I need you to be honest. Do you want revenge, or do you want justice?" "What's the difference?" "Revenge is emotional. It's about hurting him because he hurt you. Justice is strategic. It's about making sure he faces consequences for his actions and can never do this to anyone else." I thought about it. Part of me wanted to hurt Marcus the way he'd hurt me, wanted to see him suffer, humiliated, destroyed. But that wasn't who I was, and it wasn't who my grandmother had raised me to be. "Justice," I said firmly. "I want justice." Robert smiled. "Your grandmother said you'd say that. She was very proud of you, Miss Chen. Even though she couldn't tell you about any of this, she was always proud." He stood up and walked to a safe built into the wall of the conference room. He pulled out one more folder, this one thicker than all the others. "The Chen Family Justice Protocol," he said, placing it in front of me. "Your grandmother's masterpiece. This is a step-by-step plan for how to handle someone who has defrauded, betrayed, or attempted to destroy a Chen family member." I opened the folder. Inside was a detailed timeline, legal strategies, financial maneuvers, and public relations plans. It was like a military operation. "We'll start with the civil case," Robert explained. "We'll file for annulment of the divorce on grounds of fraud, then follow with a lawsuit for return of all marital assets, including the money Marcus stole from your accounts." "Will we win?" "Absolutely. The forged signature alone is enough, but we have so much more. While that's happening, we'll report the tax fraud to the IRS and the building code violations to the city. We'll also inform Simone's actual husband about her affair." "That seems cruel." "He deserves to know. Plus, your grandmother's notes indicate he's quite wealthy and vindictive. He'll likely sue both Marcus and Simone, which helps our case." "And the house?" "We'll evict them immediately. Since Marcus has no legal right to be there, we can have police remove him within 48 hours. It was almost too much to process. "There's one more thing," Robert said. "Your grandmother left you a message. She wanted you to watch it only after you'd learned everything." He pulled out a laptop and opened a video file. My grandmother's face appeared on the screen. She looked younger than I remembered, healthier. This must have been recorded a few years before she died. "Hello, my darling Amara," she said in Mandarin, our shared language. "If you are watching this, it means the worst has happened. Someone you loved has betrayed you. They have taken everything and left you with nothing, or so they think. I want to tell you a story. When I was your age, I was married to a man named David Chen, your grandfather, though you never met him. He was handsome, charming, successful. I loved him completely. We built a life together, or so I thought. One day, I came home early and found him with another woman. When I confronted him, he laughed at me. He told me I was worthless, that I'd brought nothing to the marriage, and that I should be grateful he'd married me at all. He kicked me out with nothing but the clothes on my back. I stood on the street, 32 years old, no money, no job, no family in this country. I wanted to die. But then I remembered something my mother told me before I left China. She said, "May, the Chen women have survived for 1,000 years because we know a secret. We know that power comes not from being seen, but from being underestimated." So I didn't cry. I didn't beg. I disappeared. I worked 3 jobs. I saved every penny. I learned English at night. I studied business and law. And slowly, quietly, I built an empire. Not in my name, but in the names of corporations and trusts that no one could trace back to me. 10 years later, David's business failed. He had borrowed money from dangerous people and couldn't pay it back. He came to me, begging for help. And I said no. I watched him lose everything: the house, the cars, his reputation. And when he had nothing left, when he was as low as he'd made me feel, I bought his debt from those dangerous people. I owned him, but I didn't destroy him, Amara. That would have been too easy. Instead, I made him work for me. For 20 years, he worked for a company he didn't know I owned, earning just enough to survive, never understanding that every dollar he made was coming from the woman he'd thrown away. When he died, penniless and alone, I was the only one at his funeral. And I told him, as he lay in that coffin, that I'd won. I tell you this story not to encourage cruelty, but to teach you patience. Revenge is fast and satisfying. Justice is slow and permanent. Build yourself back up, my darling. Not to his level, but far beyond it. Show him, and show yourself, what Chen women are truly capable of. I love you always, your grandmother. The video ended. I sat in silence for a long moment, processing everything. My grandmother hadn't just left me money and property. She'd left me a blueprint for survival, for transformation, for triumph. "Are you ready, Miss Chen?" Robert asked gently. I looked at him, and for the first time since Marcus had thrown me out, I smiled. A real smile, full of certainty and power. "I'm ready." The next 48 hours were a whirlwind. Robert's firm moved with the precision of a SEAL team. By noon the first day, we'd filed paperwork with the court to freeze all of Marcus's assets, pending investigation of the forged post-nuptial agreement. By 4 p.m., we'd served Marcus with eviction papers at the mansion. The papers informed him he had 24 hours to vacate the property or face forcible removal by the police. By 8 p.m., we'd contacted Simone's husband in Miami, a man named Richard Delacroix, who, it turned out, was a wealthy nightclub owner with connections to some very scary people. The next morning, I woke up in my suite at the Ritz and checked the news on my tablet over coffee. The headline made me smile. Atlanta developer faces fraud charges. The article detailed how Marcus Webb was being investigated for multiple counts of fraud, tax evasion, and forgery. His company's assets had been frozen, and several of his projects were being halted pending investigation. There was a quote from Robert. "Mr. Webb has engaged in a systematic campaign of fraud against multiple parties, including his ex-wife. We are confident that justice will be served." My phone rang. Robert. "Good morning, Miss Chen. Have you seen the news?" "I have. That was fast. We're just getting started. Marcus tried to access his bank accounts this morning and found them frozen. He also tried to use his credit cards. Also frozen. He called his lawyer, who informed him that due to the severity of the charges, he's dropping him as a client." "What about the eviction?" "That's why I'm calling. Marcus is refusing to leave the house. He's barricaded himself and Simone inside, claiming we have no legal right to evict him." "Can he do that?" "Not for long. I've contacted the police, and they're going to execute the eviction this afternoon. I thought you might want to be there." Did I want to be there? Did I want to see Marcus dragged out of my house by police? Yes. Yes, I did. "I'll be there," I said. At 2 p.m., I stood across the street from the mansion, watching as police cars and a locksmith van pulled up. A small crowd of neighbors had gathered, sensing drama. Robert stood beside me, along with 2 other attorneys from his firm. "Are you sure you want to watch this?" Robert asked. "I need to," I said. The police knocked on the door. No answer. They knocked again, louder this time, announcing their presence. Still no answer. Finally, they gave the signal to the locksmith, who began working on the front door. The door swung open, and 4 police officers entered. 3 minutes later, Marcus was escorted out in handcuffs. He looked terrible, unshaven, his clothes rumpled, his face red with rage. "This is illegal," he shouted. "You can't do this. That's my house. Sir, you need to calm down, one of the officers said. I won't calm down. Do you know who I am? I'm Marcus Webb. I'm a major developer in this city. That woman, he pointed at me across the street. That woman is insane. She's trying to ruin me. He stopped when he saw me. Our eyes met across the distance. I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. I just looked at him with the same cold indifference he'd shown me 2 days ago. Simone was escorted out next, crying hysterically. This is a mistake, she wailed. We didn't do anything wrong. Marcus, do something. Shut up, Simone, Marcus snapped. The officers led them to separate police cars. As Marcus was being put into the back of one car, another car pulled up. A black Mercedes with Florida plates. Richard Delacroix stepped out. He was a large man, built like a linebacker, with cold eyes and expensive taste in suits. He walked straight to the police car holding Simone. One of the officers tried to stop him, but Richard showed him something, probably ID, and was allowed to approach. He leaned down to the window and said something to Simone. Even from across the street, I could see her face go white with terror. Richard straightened up, adjusted his cuffs, and walked back to his Mercedes without looking at anyone else. That was ominous, one of Robert's associates murmured. That was justice, Robert corrected. The police finished processing the scene and drove away with Marcus and Simone. Robert turned to me. Miss Chen, the property is now secure. We've changed all the locks, and I have a security team coming to monitor it until you decide what you want to do with it. What are my options? You can move back in. You can sell it. You can rent it. It's yours to do with as you please. I looked at the mansion, the beautiful Victorian architecture, the garden I'd planted, the life I'd tried to build. Sell it, I said. I don't want it anymore. Too many bad memories. Where will you live? I saw in the trust documents that my grandmother owned a penthouse in Midtown. Is it occupied? Robert smiled. No, Miss Chen. That's been kept vacant, waiting for you. Your grandmother called it your emergency palace. Then I'll live there. Over the next week, my life transformed completely. I moved into the penthouse, a stunning 3-bedroom unit on the top floor of a luxury building with floor-to-ceiling windows and a view of the entire city. I hired an interior designer to furnish it exactly how I wanted, no compromises, no considering anyone else's taste. I went shopping, really shopping, with my grandmother's black credit card. Not to show off, but to rebuild my wardrobe, to feel like myself again. I started learning about my grandmother's businesses, sitting in on meetings with the property managers, the investment advisors, the accountants. I had a lot to learn, but I was a fast study, and I watched as the dominoes fell. Marcus's company filed for bankruptcy after the IRS investigation revealed massive tax fraud. His projects were all halted or sold off to pay debts. Simone's marriage ended in a spectacular divorce that played out on social media. Her husband Richard made sure everyone knew she'd been cheating, and her reputation as an influencer evaporated overnight. Her sponsors dropped her, her followers abandoned her, and the last I heard, she'd moved back in with her mother in Valdosta. The forged post-nuptial agreement case went to trial. Marcus tried to claim he didn't know the signature was forged, that his lawyer had handled everything, but we had evidence, including recorded phone calls, thanks to my grandmother's investigators, where Marcus explicitly discussed creating the fake document to protect his assets in case I ever got smart and tried to leave. The judge was not amused. Marcus was sentenced to 5 years in prison for fraud, forgery, and theft. As he was led away from the courthouse, he looked at me one last time. You destroyed me, he said. You took everything. No, Marcus, I replied calmly. You destroyed yourself. I just made sure you faced the consequences. 6 months after that horrible day on the sidewalk, I sat in my penthouse office, reviewing proposals for a new investment opportunity. My phone rang. Robert Morrison. Miss Chen, I have news. Good news? That depends on your perspective. Marcus is trying to get early release by claiming he's rehabilitated and remorseful. He's requested a meeting with you. Why? He wants to apologize. Or so his lawyer claims. I thought about it. Part of me never wanted to see Marcus again. But another part, the part that was my grandmother's granddaughter, was curious. Set it up, I said. But in a controlled environment, I want witnesses. The meeting took place in a conference room at the prison. Marcus sat across from me, wearing an orange jumpsuit, looking thin and tired. Thank you for coming, he said. His voice was quiet, almost humble. I didn't come for you, I said. I came for closure. I deserve that. He looked down at his hands. Amara, I'm sorry. I'm sorry for everything. For how I treated you. For what I took. For the lies. You deserved better. I studied his face, looking for sincerity. I wasn't sure if I found it. Why? I asked. Why did you do it? We had a good life together, or at least I thought we did. Marcus was quiet for a long moment. Because I was scared, he finally said. When we met, I was nobody. I was trying to build my business, failing at everything, drowning in debt. You believed in me. You supported me. You used your inheritance from your parents to help me get started. I remember. And I built something. I became successful. And the more successful I got, the more I realized that I'd started with your money. That everything I had was because you'd given me a chance. And I couldn't stand it. Couldn't stand what? Couldn't stand that I owed you, that my success wasn't really mine. So I convinced myself that you were holding me back, that you were taking credit for my work, that you didn't deserve any of it. But I never took credit. I never asked for anything. I know. That made it worse. Because if you'd been demanding or cruel, I could have justified leaving you. But you were just good. And that made me feel small. I shook my head, amazed at the twisted logic. So you destroyed our marriage because my kindness made you feel inadequate? Yes. And I'm sorry. I know it doesn't change anything. But I'm sorry. I stood up to leave. Amara, wait, Marcus said. I heard you're doing well. That you came into some family money or something? I'm glad. You deserve to be happy. I almost told him, almost explained that the family money was actually a $47 million empire, that I owned more property than he'd ever dreamed of, that the house he'd kicked me out of had actually been mine all along. But I didn't, because he didn't deserve to know. He didn't deserve to understand how thoroughly he'd underestimated me, how completely his cruelty had backfired. Goodbye, Marcus, I said, and walked out. I never saw him again. A year after that sidewalk moment, I stood in the ballroom of the Ritz-Carlton, surrounded by hundreds of people. The Chen Foundation had just been officially launched, a nonprofit dedicated to helping women who'd been economically abused by partners or family members. We provided legal services, financial education, housing assistance, and business grants. Everything I wished I'd had during those dark hours. Ladies and gentlemen, the MC announced, please welcome the founder and director of the Chen Foundation, Amara Chen. I walked up to the podium, looking out at the crowd. Business leaders, politicians, journalists, and most importantly, dozens of women who'd been through what I'd been through. Thank you all for being here, I began. A year ago, I stood on a sidewalk with nothing. I'd been thrown out of my home, my marriage was destroyed, my bank accounts were empty. I thought my life was over. But my grandmother, Mei Chen, had taught me something I'd forgotten in that moment. She taught me that the Chen women never truly lose because we know how to turn nothing into everything. This foundation exists because of her wisdom, her planning, and her belief that every woman deserves a second chance, a way to fight back, a path to not just survival, but triumph. To every woman here tonight who's been told she's worthless, who's been left with nothing, who's been made to feel small, you are not what they said you were. You are powerful beyond measure. And we are here to help you prove it. The applause was deafening. After the speeches, after the networking and the photos, I stepped out onto the balcony for some air. Robert joined me. "Your grandmother would be proud," he said. "I hope so." "I know so. She told me once that she wasn't worried about leaving you money. She was worried about leaving you wisdom. But she knew that if you ever needed both, you'd use them well." I looked out over the Atlanta skyline, the city that had seen me at my lowest and was now watching me rise. Sometimes, late at night, I'd sit in my penthouse and look at the photo of my grandmother I kept on my desk. "You knew," I'd say to her. "You knew exactly what would happen, exactly what I'd need, exactly who I'd become." I like to think she smiled back. The Chen women had survived for 1,000 years by being underestimated, by hiding their power, by striking only when the moment was right. And I'd learned the lesson perfectly. Marcus thought he'd thrown away trash when he kicked me out. He had no idea he'd actually unleashed a dragon. And by the time he realized his mistake, it was far too late. The rusty key my grandmother left me didn't just open a trunk. It opened a door to who I really was, who I was always meant to be. And I walked through that door and never looked back.